"You're holding up progress with unnecessary worries," my boss said as he slid the termination notice across his desk. "We need people who focus on hitting deadlines." My name is WWDE Connolly. I'm 51 years old and have spent 30 years working on construction sites around Billings, Montana. I began as a laborer and climbed the ranks to become a site supervisor at Driftline Construction. I understand the pulse of a job site, the hum of a well-maintained generator, the sight of a perfectly level foundation, the tension in cables done right. Most importantly, I can tell when something isn't right. For the last 4 months, I was managing the Riverview Commercial Complex, an 8-story office building destined to be the tallest structure in the city's east side. The project was already running late when they brought in Justin Hawkins, a project manager in his 30s, freshly hired from some fancy firm in Seattle. On his first day, he wandered the site with a tablet, tapping away, but never once got his hands dirty or talked to the crew beyond brief hellos. Last week, I pointed out the temporary supports on the third floor didn't meet the specifications. "These braces need reinforcing before we build any higher," I told him. Without looking up from his tablet, he replied, "The engineering team approved this setup. We're moving forward as planned." I documented everything like I always do: photos, notes, emails. Some might say I was covering my back. I called it doing my job. Sitting in the site trailer, I watched Justin wait for a meltdown that never came. Guys like him expected men like me to yell, throw things, make a scene when pressured. I just gave a single nod and grabbed my hard hat. "I'll clear out my locker," I said. "I already packed your personal items," he answered, sliding a cardboard box toward me. "Security will escort you to your truck." Security? Like I was some threat. Like 3 decades of showing up early and leaving late didn't matter. Like raising valid safety concerns made me dangerous. I took the box without looking inside and followed the uneasy young guard to my truck. Some crew members noticed and stopped working. I nodded at them. Not a goodbye, but a warning. Be careful. As I drove away, I caught Justin already chatting with my replacement. The other man nodded enthusiastically, probably promising to keep things moving at all costs. They didn't know it yet, but this wouldn't be the last time they'd see me. I spent my career building things to last. My father was a carpenter who taught me shortcuts create weaknesses, and weaknesses eventually lead to failure. "Do it right the first time," he'd say, "even if no one else notices." That mindset earned me respect among crews and contractors, but also cost me jobs at companies that prioritize speed over quality. Twice before, I was fired for insisting on doing things properly. Each time, I landed a new job within weeks. Good superintendents who care about code compliance aren't as common as you'd think. My wife Elaine understood my values, even when it hurt our finances. "Your name is on that building just as much as the developers," she told me. "You have to be able to sleep at night." Driftline was different once. The founder, Gregory Stein, built the company on a reputation for quality. I joined 7 years ago when they were still mid-sized, mostly handling commercial renovations and small developments. Then Gregory retired, his son took over, and the company tripled in size. Suddenly, meeting deadlines mattered more than doing things right. The Riverview project was the biggest yet, and the pressure from above was intense. The first warning came when they replaced our original project manager, Hank Willis, a seasoned pro I'd worked with for years, with Justin Hawkins. "They're bringing in new blood," Hank warned me during his last week. "These young guys from big firms care only about the bottom line. Watch yourself, Wade." I nodded, not realizing how true that was. In Justin's first month, small corners were cut. Safety meetings shrank from 15 to 5 minutes. Material inspections became superficial. Documentation requirements loosened. When I pushed back, they called me old school and resistant to change. So, I started keeping a separate log of all code violations and shortcuts. digital photos saved in the cloud, emails from my personal account, voice recordings when Montana law allowed. The breaking point came when I found they'd installed lower-grade structural bolts on the 4th and 5th floors than specified in the plans. An inspector might not notice without close scrutiny, but in an earthquake or severe wind, it could cause catastrophic failure. "We need to replace these," I told Justin, showing him the bolts. He glanced at them and said, "The supplier says they meet acceptable standards. We're not delaying the steel crew for this." That was 2 days before they fired me. After being escorted off the site, I drove straight home with the cardboard box beside me like a silent passenger. Elaine wouldn't be home from her hospital shift for hours. I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the house we bought 15 years ago. It needed a new roof. I had planned to do it myself this summer. Now I had the time, but maybe not the money. Inside, I set the box on the kitchen table and finally looked through its contents. My thermos, a few reference books, a framed photo of Elaine and me at Glacier National Park. But my personal tools were gone. A Milwaukee drill set, quality measuring devices, specialized gear I'd collected over decades, about $2,000 worth. I made a list of everything missing, then called Driftline's HR department at their main office. The woman who answered sounded uneasy when I explained. "I'll look into it, Mr. Connolly," she said, "but I should tell you that, according to Mr. Hawkins's report, you were terminated for insubordination and creating a hostile work environment." I hadn't once raised my voice to Justin, not even today. "That's interesting," I said calmly. "I'd like that in writing, please. The reasons for my termination, and I want my tools returned. Otherwise, I'll have my attorney contact you." She promised to call me back. I hung up and stared at my phone before opening my personal email. There, organized in folders, was every record I'd kept over the past 4 months. I had documented 76 distinct safety violations, ranging from minor oversights to potentially catastrophic hazards, all backed up with photographic evidence. Every single one included records of my attempts to address the issues through the proper channels. This wasn't just about me getting fired anymore. It was about the 200 people who would eventually work in that building. It was about the construction crew, unaware of what was being hidden behind drywall and beneath the floors. It was about every shortcut turned into a possible deadly risk down the line. I created a new email account and sent a detailed complaint to the regional office of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The subject line was straightforward: urgent. Multiple critical safety violations at Riverview Commercial Complex. I worked carefully and methodically, organizing each violation by category and severity, cross-referencing code requirements, and attaching all my documentation. 4 hours later, Elaine came home and found me still glued to the computer. "Wade, what happened?" she asked. I explained everything while typing at the same time. She stood behind me, resting her hands gently on my shoulders as she read the screen over my shoulder. "They're going to fight back," she said softly. "Let them," I replied. "I might not get another job in this town." I paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Some things are more important than a paycheck." She squeezed my shoulders with a quiet strength. "I know. That's why I married you." I hit send at 9:47 p.m., then started drafting another email, this time to the State Building Inspector's office. The next morning at 7:30, Justin called. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Wade?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "Good morning, Justin. I just got a call from OSHA. They said they received a complaint about the site. Was that you?" I sat at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand. "I documented legitimate safety concerns. That's all." "You were fired for causing problems," he snapped, "and now you're proving me right." His tone softened almost to reason. "Look, Wade, I get that you're upset, but this kind of vindictive behavior won't help you find another job. In fact, I'm already getting calls from other firms asking about you." The threat was clear. "Keep pushing, and you'll be blacklisted." "If the site is up to code, I've got nothing to worry about," I said. He laughed, short and sharp. "We both know inspections are subjective. What's a violation to one inspector is an acceptable variance to another. But what isn't subjective is how the industry treats disgruntled ex-employees who try to sabotage projects after they're let go." "Is that what happened to my tools?" I asked. "Sabotage?" He paused. "What tools?" "The ones missing from my personal effects." "I've already filed a police report for theft," I said, even though it wasn't true yet. His reaction told me everything. "You know what? Keep the tools. Consider it severance. But drop this OSHA nonsense before you hurt yourself. Goodbye, Wade." I hung up and immediately called the police to file the theft report. They took my information but didn't sound hopeful about recovering anything. Next, I reached out to 3 construction companies where I had contacts to ask about job openings. 2 never returned my calls. The third, Elkridge Builders, had the owner's son call me back. "I'd like to help you out, Wade. I really would," he said. "But we're full up right now. And well, there's been some talk." "What kind of talk?" "That you're difficult to work with. That you cause trouble." He sounded genuinely uncomfortable. "Look, I know my dad thinks highly of you, but the industry's tight. Maybe check back in a few months after this all blows over." By mid-afternoon, I'd gotten similar responses from 2 more companies. Word travels fast in construction, especially in a city the size of Billings. At 4:15 p.m., my phone rang from an unknown number. It was an attorney representing Driftline Construction. "Mr. Connolly, I'm calling to inform you that any further communication from you regarding the Riverview project could be considered defamatory and lead to legal action." "Are you saying the company would sue me for reporting legitimate safety violations to regulatory authorities?" "I'm saying your characterization of standard industry practices as violations appears retaliatory, given the timing. Also, you removed confidential project documents when you left, which constitutes theft of intellectual property." "I hadn't taken anything. All my records were created on my personal devices and stored in my own accounts, but they were trying to discredit me." "Send me a formal cease and desist if that's your position. Otherwise, I have nothing more to say." 3 days later, I received a thick envelope from their law firm. Inside was a cease and desist letter threatening legal action if I kept speaking out, along with a reminder about a non-disclosure agreement they claimed I'd signed at hiring. I never signed any such agreement, but fighting this would require a lawyer I couldn't afford. They were trying to bury me before the inspectors even arrived. A week after my termination, I sat in a downtown diner when Franklin Weber slid into the booth across from me. Frank had been my electrical foreman on the Riverview project, and we'd worked together on and off for 15 years. "This is probably a bad idea," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Probably," I agreed, pushing my coffee aside. "How are things at the site?" "Crazy," he said. "Justin's got everyone working overtime to fix the issues before the OSHA inspection scheduled for next Monday." I nodded. "They're replacing the bolts and reinforcing the supports you flagged." "But here's the thing, Wade." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It goes deeper than what you saw. They've been falsifying materials documentation for months. Remember those concrete samples that failed strength tests back in February?" I did. The first foundation pour had shown worrying results, but Justin assured everyone the later tests were fine. "They never retested," Frank said. "They just changed the paperwork. Same with the fire ratings on some materials. The manufacturer sent a notice that a batch was below spec, but it got buried." My stomach tightened. "How do you know all this?" "Donna in purchasing. She's been keeping her own records because she feared liability. When she heard you were fired, she came to me." He slid a flash drive across the table. Copies of the original documentation compared to what was submitted to the inspectors. I stared at the small black device, hesitant to reach for it. "Why are you doing this, Frank? You've got a pension coming in a few years." "My son's firm is going to lease 3 floors in that building when it's done." He met my eyes steadily. "And I was raised to do what's right, same as you." I picked up the flash drive. "They'll figure out where this came from." "Probably," he said, "but I'm old enough not to care much anymore." After Frank left, I made my way to the public library and logged onto one of their computers to carefully examine the files. What I discovered was far worse than I had anticipated. The records exposed not just careless oversights or minor shortcuts, but a deliberate, systematic scheme of falsifying safety tests and material quality reports. This problem extended well beyond Justin Hawkins. It reached into the upper levels of corporate management, implicating purchasing directors and project executives. The Riverview project had been intentionally underbid to secure the contract, and now they were recouping costs by using inferior materials. As I drove home, I passed by the construction site. The building's steel frame had climbed to 6 stories, stark against the Montana sky. I thought about all the people who would eventually work there, completely unaware of the dangerous secrets concealed inside the walls and floors. Once home, Elaine shared some startling news of her own. "I ran into Vivian Taylor at the hospital today," she told me. "She's married to a member of the city council." Elaine went on to explain that Driftline had made sizable political donations last year to the mayor and several council members, right before the city expedited approval of the Riverview zoning variance. Suddenly, all the pieces fit together: political influence, rushed permits, corners cut, and falsified paperwork. This was no longer mere negligence, it was corruption. That evening, I left a voicemail for my contact at OSHA, explaining that I had additional evidence requiring review prior to the scheduled inspection. Then I forwarded all the files Frank had given me to both OSHA and the State Building Inspector's office. The following morning, I received an unexpected call from Gregory Stein, Driftline's retired founder. "We need to have a serious conversation, Wade," he said, his tone grave. "This situation is far more serious than you realize." We met at his lakefront home about half an hour from the city. At 72, Gregory still carried the sturdy hands and upright posture of a man hardened by decades of work on construction sites before shifting to management. "I never should have handed the company over to my son," he admitted as we sat on the deck overlooking the water. "Thomas always prioritized expansion over quality, but I never imagined he'd go this far." "Have you heard about the fabricated documents?" I asked. Gregory nodded slowly. "I've been hearing rumors from old contacts. When your OSHA complaint went public, several people reached out to me." Taking a sip of his coffee, he continued, "What you don't know is that Riverview isn't just another building for Driftline. It's the keystone for their bid on the new hospital expansion, a contract worth $100 million. At that moment, it became clear why they'd reacted so strongly to my complaint. If OSHA uncovered serious violations at Riverview, the hospital deal would slip from their grasp. "I've been gathering evidence myself," Gregory went on. "Thomas doesn't realize I still have access to certain company accounts. I've tracked irregular payments to city inspectors, altered testing results, everything." He locked eyes with me. "I built that company on my name and reputation. I refused to let them ruin it or construct death traps bearing my legacy." We spent the next 2 hours plotting our strategy. Gregory planned to confront the board of directors with his evidence to force internal reform. Meanwhile, I would work alongside OSHA to ensure the inspection was comprehensive and could not be undermined. The very next day, a reporter from the Billings Gazette contacted me. Somehow, she had learned about the OSHA complaint. "I'm preparing a piece on construction safety oversight," she said. Your name was mentioned as someone with concerns about the Riverview project. I was cautious in my reply. I can confirm that I reported safety violations through the proper channels. Beyond that, I'm unable to comment on an ongoing investigation. She pressed further. There are rumors of falsified safety reports. Can you confirm if someone leaked documents, possibly from city officials? I suggested she request the public records relating to the project's permits and inspections. That's all I can say for now. 3 days later, the article was published. Although it didn't mention me by name, it highlighted serious accusations from a former site supervisor regarding structural integrity and questionable documentation. By that afternoon, the mayor's office issued a statement affirming full confidence in the city's inspection process and pledging transparent cooperation with regulatory agencies. The following morning, Frank texted me, "OSHA is on site now, unscheduled inspection with multiple inspectors." I couldn't help but smile. The article had sped up the process. 2 hours later, Gregory phoned. "The board has called an emergency session for tomorrow. I'll be presenting all the evidence." How is Thomas handling it? He's unaware so far, busy at the site dealing with OSHA. Everything was unfolding faster than we'd planned. That evening, a courier delivered an envelope to my doorstep. Inside was a formal job offer from Bridgewell Contracting, a respected company based in Bozeman with a branch in Billings. The letter didn't mention it, but the owner was a longtime friend of Gregory's. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Frank. "Jay terminated immediately. Corporate takeover of project management underway." Once the dominoes began falling, justice came swiftly. Yet I knew Driftline would attempt to minimize fallout by scapegoating Justin while shielding the company's higher-ups. They would claim he acted alone and that corporate was unaware of his tactics. That's why Gregory and I agreed on one final measure. The next day, he would submit all his evidence to the state attorney general's office, alongside a formal petition for a criminal investigation into corporate fraud. The truth would be exposed, regardless of who it hurt. 3 weeks after my termination, I stood near the back of the county courthouse's meeting room as the Montana Department of Labor and Industry revealed their findings. Press filled half the seats, while Driftline executives and city officials occupied the front row. Thomas Stein sat rigidly beside the company's attorney, his expression carefully composed. For 2 weeks he'd worked to cast himself as part of the solution, publicly praising whistleblowers for exposing isolated lapses and promising full cooperation. Then the commissioner's voice cut through the whispers. "After a thorough investigation, we have uncovered systematic and deliberate falsification of safety documentation at the Riverview Commercial Complex. The violations are so severe that we are issuing an immediate stop work order on the project." Camera flashes lit the room as she continued. "We also recommend criminal charges against 3 Driftline executives for knowingly endangering public safety and worker welfare through fraudulent practices." One of those executives was Thomas Stein. I watched as Thomas leaned in to whisper urgently to his attorney. The lawyer gave a slight shake of his head. There would be no easy way out this time. Gregory stood beside me, his face serious but determined. He'd sacrificed his relationship with his son to do what was right. Neither of us took satisfaction in Driftline's public collapse, but we both knew it was necessary. The commissioner concluded by thanking the whistleblowers whose evidence had been crucial in averting what might have become a disaster. Though she didn't name us directly, Thomas turned in his seat and scanned the room until his gaze locked with mine. I held his stare steadily. Not with anger or triumph, just the calm of a man who had done his duty, even when it cost him everything. Some principles simply cannot be compromised. 6 months after the Riverview scandal broke, I stood on the foundation of the new Billings Memorial Hospital East Wing. My hard hat bore the Bridgewell Contracting logo, and my title was Senior Project Manager. Beneath my boots, The concrete had been poured precisely to specification, with thorough testing and documentation. Every step had been carefully planned, double-checked, and done right the first time. The old Riverview building had been stripped down to its foundation and was being rebuilt by a coalition of local contractors under intense regulatory scrutiny. Driftline construction no longer existed. The company had dissolved after criminal indictments and civil lawsuits made continuing impossible. Thomas Stein had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against other executives and the city officials who had turned a blind eye. Gregory sold his retirement home to help create a fund supporting construction workers who lost their jobs amid the fallout. Not everyone supported my actions. Some in the industry still saw me as the man who brought down a major company and cost many their livelihoods, but others quietly thanked me for standing up for standards that protect everyone. Frank Wauber was now my electrical superintendent. Donna from purchasing had joined Bridgewell too. Together, we'd brought over several trusted professionals who shared our commitment to doing things the right way. Elaine and I had finished putting a new roof on our house ourselves, working evenings and weekends. The physical labor was a welcome relief after months of legal battles and depositions. "Ready for the inspection?" my assistant asked, approaching with a clipboard in hand. "Always," I replied. I'd learned that doing the right thing rarely comes without a price, but I'd also discovered that I could sleep soundly, look my wife in the eye, and face myself honestly each morning. Some victories aren't measured by what you gain, but by what you refuse to lose.